Hey, what's up, everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So, real quick, I want to show you the difference, I think, in my own style of male to female eyes. So, I kind of say I'll draw like one set, and somebody asks for maybe the alternate set, something like that. So, I figured this way I can show you comparably what I think you should look for drawing the difference from male to female eyes. So, let's go ahead and just say male, female. Okay, so first off, I would start by doing the spacing. So I would do that on any set of eyes, even a monster, male or female. And then basically with the female eyes, I would start probably with a little bit more open kind of shape. So I start with kind of a basic shape that I always do. I'll draw it off to the side to show you. It's kind of this thing. It's not really an eye shape yet, but what it does is it helps me to remember the curve coming down here, back here, down and around here, and up through here. And then actually the eye starts to do this, so it changes, and this is kind of cartoony, but, so it's got all these different shapes in there. But I start with this basic kind of, I don't know, just go-to shape that I always do. And then for the male eye, I do the same thing, but I immediately make them more squinted, a little bit more narrow. That's just, and again, this is going to be based on my style. So you'll have to take what you can from this and apply it to your own style if you draw differently, or maybe you draw anime or manga, or I do American comics generally, whatever. Okay, so that's the first stage of it where, let me soft erase this back. So it's very rough, but, I recommend keeping everything rough in the very beginning stage of your artwork, just so that you can really fill out the process. You can work out any flaws, things like that. Now, when it comes to eyebrows, I generally will keep the eyebrows further away from the female eyes. I'll make them obviously thinner, and then a slight taper to the back. So what I kind of picture here, even though I'm not drawing the rest of the face, is that the eyebrow is thick till it gets to the part of the brow where it starts to recede into space. So if I had to visually draw the brow, it'd be something like that. So I'm just kind of visualizing that, even though I don't have the rest of the information there in place to probably get it as correct as it needs to be. But the main part of this is to have the brows taper and get pretty thin. Okay, so over here, I'll draw the brows a bit closer to the eyes. Not always, but it's just kind of, I think, mainly because one, the brow is thicker, the eyebrows are thicker on a male, and then also they just don't tend to have as lighthearted expressions, or at least maybe that's the way I see it, but it seems to be the thing that I notice. So they seem to be closer to the eye like this. And then now if I was to get back in here and redraw the eye with a bit more clarity, I would try to get a bit more of those bends that I'm used to seeing. I'll usually draw like a little bit of the eyelash pointing, more of a placeholder actually at this point. So the tear duct pointing down, it rounds back, comes around this way. And I try to start thinking about the roundedness of the eye inside the shape. So I start to draw kind of this circle in there just to kind of feel that out. And again, this still isn't the finished shape of the eye all the way, but each time I redraw over top, I try to refine it a little bit more. The other thing that I think is important to try to get right with eyes is a couple things. One, I try to make sure that the tear ducts point and kind of meet to a center line in the face. And they're a little bit too close together, so I'll actually adjust that as well. And this one side's smaller. Now, something I'll do to kind of check the work, and there's even an off shape, an awkward shape, where they're not entirely the right shape, or they're not the right shape from left to right. One of the ways that I'll check that is I'll go, let's see, mirror canvas, and there it kind of stands out even further. So as to where here it comes in and it tapers in. This is a more squattier kind of eye. This one's more rounded out and oval like this. So if you see, it's quite off from the other side. And that can be tricky to get right, so I'll just kind of keep picking at it. It seems to be one of my things that I have a tough time with. So I just keep redrawing it and moving the lines around until I get it there. And this is also why I feel it's necessary to keep sketching for as long as possible before drawing in the darker lines, just to kind of work out any flaws like this in the work. Okay, so let's go back and forth and I'll keep fixing that. So same thing here, kind of the same shape, but then again, it's going to be a little bit more squinted or squattier and a bit more angular, at least the way that I draw them. So I tend to make the male eyes, by comparison, more angular in the way that I draw them. And then also the, let's see, let me get a little more in there. I try to keep the lines a little bit lighter than I would, so by the time I start to draw in the detail for the female eyes, let's scale this up a bit further too, because we'll take advantage of the full screen here. Okay, so as I start to clean these up even further, I'll use darker lines for the eyelashes, so the trimming of the eye. So let's try to draw it again, see if I can. Another thing I'll try to do to get symmetry right is I'll draw from side to side, and I'll do, say, just the top eyelid here, and I'll look at it, see if there's anything I can fix. I think it still needs to come down a little bit more by comparison, like that. And then maybe I work on just the tear duct. And I think the tricky part is to make the small changes from one side to the other to make it look like one side is receding into space. So one way, as the eye starts to get further closer to the face, or on an angle where the side of the face gets closer to the eye, you'll actually see the side of the eye more than you'll see the point of the eye. The point of the eye will actually wrap around and it'll end up back here somewhere. So visually it looks like it disappears and you see the side of the eye. So that's something to keep in mind for, I think, more angular shots than this really, but just something you want to be aware of, that as the face starts to tilt away from the viewer, that you'll start to see a little bit more of the side of the eye versus the point. And it's helpful to note that because when you're doing eyes like this, a lot of times it's real easy to want to do this to every eye, even on those pretty horrible eyes, but hopefully you get the idea there, that it's just real easy to say, okay, there's an eye with the point, there's an eye with the point, but in all actuality, the angle of the face is so great that you wouldn't see that part there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get the brow in here real quick. So a little bit thicker lines. Again, I want to keep them thick at the front and then taper them back like this. Get some kind of hint of the forehead meeting the nose there. Okay, so let's say that this is pretty close. It's probably still a little bit off from side to side, but we'll say that this is pretty close. We'll get this heavier eyelash in. Something to note with eyelashes is that they always point the direction of the face, and it's real hard to kind of get that. And in comics, a lot of times we'll just draw them off to the side, but what you want to envision is that they essentially would point forward more, like this. So for this particular one, we'll just draw them off to the side, like I said, like I traditionally would do for comics anyways. So in comics, I'll generally draw them more like this, and then I'll bring the point up kind of quicker so that it looks a little bit more forward, but I do them as a bulk shape. So, and this is a good way to show a feminine look to the eyes as well. So these real heavy lines around the eyes, and some people like to do the ridge of the eyelid, so you fit something like that in there. I'm not going to do that on these. I like to just make the eyelash pretty heavy, and then I break it off right on the inside like that. So that's my way of creating that ridge. So again, I'll start real heavy on the outside here with the eyelash. As I come in this way, I'll show that little bit of a ridge just to give a little bit more depth to it. I'll also darken it on the insets of the eyes right here. So again, trying to show a little bit more depth and roundedness to the eye. I could show a little bit of that ridge right back here. So something like that, because then it gives that impression that the eye is rounding around like it should. And I'm constantly moving the lines around to try to get symmetry right, because it's just, again, it's one of those tricky things for me, and it's I think it could be a tough one for all of us, but it's a combination of symmetry and angles. And the eyes are probably the toughest part of that, I think. So a little bit of that top eyelid in there like that. And then as far as the direction of the eyes, well, let's jump over to the male eyes and refine these a bit further as well. And let's take this time. Well, I'll do a little bit on this and then I'll flip them, because like I said, I like to flip the artwork as much as possible back and forth, so I can really try to spot any errors. Okay, so let's say again, I'm trying to keep it a bit more angular, probably a smaller tear duct. You know, less curvature overall. The upper eyelid can said to be a little bit thinner as well. Not always. I mean, obviously, all these things that I'm telling you are going to be very based upon the type of character you're doing. So not all characters are obviously going to have thin, squatty eyes like this, but it's just general things that I notice or I create in my comic style art. So the eyebrows, I tend to make them pretty heavy, and also I put a little bit more of a change in angle in them. So I might make it real thick right here, a little point there, a little change in angle for the, again, trying to envision that shape change of the brow. And let's go ahead and flip it now, see if I can spot any flaws. Yeah, I think it's decent. It's not great, but this is where I would just keep picking at it and refining it. And this won't be so much on refinement as much as just trying to explain the differences that I see when doing these. So the other thing that you can do is you can really round out these eyelashes to look like they're going around the form of the eyes. So again, if the eye is the face is kind of pointed, we'll say dimensionally at this angle like this, then really the eyelashes should do that as well. So just keep that in mind. You want to play with it and try somewhere the eyelashes are all pointing the same way and coming forward. And it's really just the subtlety of the bend of the eyelash. So, you know, you've got out this way, you've got coming up at you a little bit more, directly at you. It's going to kind of look like this, and then it's going to turn the other way. So if you want that kind of look, and that's more of a realism type thing than comic illustration in my opinion. So I tend to really make these pretty thick and do all kinds of style things with the eyelashes, whatever. Taper this in pretty heavily right here. Get a nice little bend in there. Okay. So, and with the male eyes over here, I would draw a little bit heavier line up top, even though I'm not going to get into the eyelashes, and I definitely don't want the lines to be as heavy as the female eyes. I would get a little bit of that difference from top to bottom. You'll notice too, some artists will even thin out this line quite a bit, and some will even have it purposely disappear to show a little bit lighter definition and light source on the bottom of that eye. So that's something else. And then obviously if you want the depth of the eyelid, you can draw a little line like this and get a little depth in there. You know, there's all kinds of choices as far as that goes. And let's go ahead and have the eyes kind of looking back. So I'll draw the iris like this. Same here. And the other difference here is I tend to draw the irises larger on the female eyes. And again, that's definitely a style choice. Generally, the iris is 1/3 of the distance of the eye from left to right. But again, as a style choice, I like to make them a bit larger. This is pretty close to 1/3 though. And the tricky part to me is always the pupil placement. So the pupil is actually generally really close to the top, but you don't want to get it too close because then they appear sleepy. And it's always a little bit higher than center because the eye, if you were to look at the eye from the side, it's rounded and there's actually a coating and everything, all the colors inset back. So all these things kind of give to this dimensional effect that you got to be aware of. One of the things is this: if you're drawing the eye at an angle, that all this becomes a little bit more of an oval based on the angle, not circles. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. So here I'm drawing it a bit more circular because they're kind of looking straight back at the camera or at the viewer. But just keep that in mind. I'm adding a drop shadow to the top of the iris. So that always helps to convey a little bit of depth. I tend to thicken the sides of the line work on the iris. Glare there, a little glare there. I kind of go a little bit glare crazy with my eyes. So the pupil here. So bringing that pupil up, now obviously there's less room on the way that I've created the male eyes. Actually, that's got to go back a tad further. But another thing, by bringing the pupil up towards the top eyelid, you also can convey a more of an intense look. So it's real important to notice that these subtle changes in placement of things like the pupil, the position of the eyes, the position of the eyebrows, all those things convey your emotion really well. So I tend to make the glares a little bit less intense on the male eyes as well. Almost like because there's less surface area, that maybe it would create less glares. So that's just my way of thinking. And then from here, it's all rendering and shading and you know, just really having fun with it. So you want to play with a variety of these styles and just kind of see what you can come up with. And then, you know, like here, I'll get in and I'll shade. I'll do like little rendering lines and things like that. This lesson won't be on all that. I just wanted to really show the differences of the male to female eyes. I've got other lessons where I show how to render stuff out and things like that. So yeah, and then keep in mind I also have an eye chart or a bunch of eye expressions on my Deviant, so you can go there. I'll make sure there's a link in the description box below, and you can get some different eye studies to practice with. And I'm making more and more of those work-along sheets, so be sure to follow me on there and you can get access to those. You can also support me on Patreon and get access to art files that I create. And I've got more of my video tutorials and custom brushes on my Gumroad. So as always, I appreciate you stopping by and watching this lesson. Let me know what you thought in the comments section below and what you'd like to see in the future, and I'll make sure to get that on the list. So thanks very much for watching. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.